Hi everyone. Uh, the topic, the title of my today's presentation is "The Brokenness of Grammars: Reading Xixi's Publishing Practice and Experimentalist Writing in Cold War Hong Kong." Um, so I will first introduce my writers here. Born in 1937, Hong Kong writer Xixi's literary career was deeply intertwined with the history of Hong Kong, from its British and Japanese colonial period to the Cold War and the pre-handover period before the returning of Hong Kong to the PRC in 1997. During her literary career that lasted for more than half a century, Cixi produced a large number of works crafts in multiple genres such as novels, short stories, prose, and reading notes. As a novelist of Hong Kong, Cixi wrote stories that covered important historical events, especially those of the experience of Hong Kong during the Cold War and its strategic position in the world of global connections. Cixi's writing captures Hong Kong's complicated situation in the middle between two conflicting ideological camps in this age of uncertainty, namely the capitalist one dominated by the United States and its strategic component Taiwan, and the communist camp composed by mainland China and Vietnam, where many refugees came from. To analyze how Cixi creates a hybrid identity of Hong Kong during this time, scholars usually approach her works from the following perspectives. Firstly, they analyze the magical element of Cixi's novels and attend to her construction of fairy tale realism. Secondly, employing a comparative lens, scholars investigate the intertextuality between traditional Chinese culture and Western modernism in Cixi's short stories and novellas. Thirdly, concentrating on Cixi's construction of a local Hong Kong identity, they analyze the allegorical myth she creates by interweaving the history of Hong Kong with fiction. Moreover, as Cixi's later works explore feminism explicitly, scholars came to realize the association between feminist care and communal identity construction in his writing. Finally, as new media studies has generated more and more debates concerning arts and literature, criticism on Cici's work also focuses on the intermediality between storytelling, visual arts, and multimedia presence. Although all of these studies delve into important aspects of Cici's writing, a few of them attend to the editorial and the publishing works that Cixi participated in during the Cold War. Indeed, the editorial work that Cixi took part in was not a supplementary task. Rather, it functioned as an important endeavor through which we could understand how Cixi constructed a communal identity of Hong Kong via a transmedia practice, crossing the boundary between the printing press, the visual culture, and the infrastructure of the city. In this presentation, I will first introduce the Cold War landscape of periodicals in Hong Kong. Then I will analyze three major periodical works that Cixi participated in since the 1960s. Finally, this presentation provides a close reading of Cixi's The Beautiful Building, 美丽大厦, a novella published in 1978, through which I analyze Cici's creation of a hybrid local and global identity of Hong Kong that not only crosses multiple media forms, but also transverses the boundary between human beings and the non-human. During the Cold War, as a place situated between the communist camp and the capitalist camp and struggling with multiple forces, Hong Kong survived and thrived with a mature network of publishing and periodical works. Lots of newspapers and periodicals were generated during this period. For example, South Sea Literature Nanyang Wenyi was published in 1961 as a literary magazine connecting the diasporic Chinese communities in Southeast Asia and Hong Kong. Not only publishing works of folkloric culture, but South Sea Literature also published translations from the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. Besides Southeast Asia, Taiwan was also part of Hong Kong's Cold War publishing network. The Big Thumb, 大拇指, a literary magazine released in 1975, published a novel, short stories, and prose from Taiwan. Named by Cixi, the Big Thumb also introduced the literary works and visual media from Japan and the Western world. As a communal identity gradually appeared in Hong Kong during this time, a kind of magazine focuses on promoting a bourgeoisie lifestyle was also released, such as the comprehensive magazine Tea Cai and the Tea and Pastries. 茶点, as Hong Kong struggled to survive among two conflicting ideological camps, and the publishing industry and the periodical works were also divided by the camp between capitalism and communism. For example, two major periodicals targeting students, the Chinese Student Weekly and the Youth Garden, 中国学生周报 and Youth Garden 青年乐园 were sponsored by a political organization of pro-democratic capitalism and communism, respectively. In its transnational network of publishing, editing, and translation, CC played a significant role as an organizer and a facilitator. She monitored at least three periodicals that circulated in Hong Kong during the Cold War, including The Big Thumb, 大拇指, the Chinese Student Weekly, 中国学生周报, and the 素叶 Literature, 素叶文学. All of these periodicals were generated and well received in this period, thus deserving a close reading, because only by reading them closely are we granted with the lens to investigate the genealogy of thoughts in Cici's writing career. Firstly, let us start from the periodical The Big Thumb, 大拇指. The Big Thumb released their first issue in 1975, mainly focuses on constructing a new and a communal identity of Hong Kong. The Big Thumb draw articles written by students and young writers. The first several issues discuss issues concerning students' everyday life, including exams, everyday routines, and school uniforms. People who wrote for the Big Thumb were usually not established writers. Sometimes they invited famous writers to write short stories and comments, but their comments were usually from ordinary lives, to cultivate a communal identity without losing global and transnational connections. The Big Thumb engaged with writings and cultural lives abroad and translated articles around Western countries. For example, in 1978, there was an article on the situation of artists in Soviet Russia, a topic concerning artists working for socialist states. Modern media was another feature of the Big Thumb. In almost every single issue, film genre, stars, and popular music were largely discussed. For example, the film The Godfather had a series of discussions lasting for many issues, and the interviews and information of popular film stars and directors were scattered among pages. For example, Italian film star Pier Paolo Pasolini's work attracted many comments in The Big Thumb, as well as Bob Dylan and Paul Kossoff, the famous Euro-American musicians who were popular among young people. As a magazine representing the communal space of Hong Kong, approaching the handover of Hong Kong, the Big Thumb published articles written by common people to express their anxieties and concerns at the end of the Cold War. For the Chinese Students Weekly, 中国学生周报, it embodies another dimension of CC's editorial work and writings, namely the presence of the United States and the pro-democratic capitalist camp. Even though CC was never officially affiliated with any pro-capitalist camp, her editorial work, The Chinese Students Weekly, registered an important aspect during the Cold War, namely the conflict between capitalism and communism, especially within the group of students. What made this periodical unique was that it was released by the Yulian Press, a publishing house sponsored by the CIA, the United States, through which they attempted to cultivate a young Hong Kong identity without relying on the political trope of communism. For example, this periodical published advertisements of how young people around the world promoted democracy with assistance from capitalist countries. Concentrating on building a young and pro-democratic identity of the Cold War Hong Kong, the Chinese Students Weekly mainly published articles concerning education, leisure, and love lives, which were all contradictory to the conservative situation in mainland China. Lots of articles concerning experience of studying abroad, including the United States and the British, were published here. At the same time, the Chinese Students Weekly published lots of articles about the backward education system and the difficulty of finding a job after graduation in mainland China. In order to promote a pro-democratic capitalism implicitly, this periodical used love lives as a crucial rhetorical strategy to promote a young Hong Kong identity rooted in the everyday lives, local realities, and psychic concerns. For Suye literature, Suye Wenxue, a literary magazine was released in 1980. CC's role was more predominant as its major editor. Different from previous two periodicals that targeted audiences of common people and students, Suye literature drew attention from literary writers, theorists, and scholars. In their first issue, Suye literature published an article about Wei Jingshen, a democratic activist in the PRC during the 1980s, thus establishing their determination to build an intellectual identity of Hong Kong. In their first several issues, Suye literature mainly published poems, articles, concerning literary theories and criticism written by intellectuals. For example, in the issue released in 1982, an article discussing the modernist nature of literature was published, attracting more and more attention. Later issues of Suye literature focused on exploring the formalist technique of literary creation and inviting professionals to comment on each other's work. For example, Xixi's prose poems and short stories were frequently read by her friends, including He Furen and Zhong Linling, through which they built a literary salon among pages. Since literacy was the major goal for Suye literature, they usually published articles that attend to formalist aesthetics and techniques, even though the contents of these articles came from everyday routines. For example, while writing about the new experience of living in a city immersed within the fast speed of globalization, writer who wrote for Suye literature incorporated political thinking and formalist experiments to their writing about the streets, the skyscrapers, the skyscrapers and elevators and the domestic technologies such as televisions and radios, through which they amplified the sense of alienation as a resident living in a changing ecology of urban development and renovations. Moreover, as a literary magazine underscoring literacy, Suye literature cultivated its transnational circuits by publishing translated work of high literary quality rather than ones tailored by political ideologies. Lots of translation and works from the West were published here. For example, Proust in Search of the Lost Time was translated and published in an issue released in the 1980s. Furthermore, to foster the potential of Hong Kong literature as world literature, there was a series of articles concerning the literary technique employed by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the Latin American Nobel Prize laureate, published in Suye literature, theorizing how Latin American literature formed its identity in an age of uncertainties. Hong Kong writers and scholars focused on the literary aspects of world literature concerning the fusion of everyday lives and formalist strategies, rather than claiming any political stance. Cici's writings were thus greatly informed by her publishing and editorial works. Without considering how the printing techniques formed a public readership in Cold War Hong Kong, could we not understand Cici's style, a modernist one fused by formalist experience and materials from everyday routine. This paper raised Cici's novella, The Beautiful Building, 美丽大厦, by contextualizing it historically and focuses on its formalist technique from three perspectives. Firstly, it analyzes the postmodernist technique employed by Cici as the novella is composed of fragmentary narratives and dialogues between a first-person narrator and a second-person narrator. Secondly, this paper focuses on how Cici constructed an interactive space between human beings and non-human infrastructure in the novel by lighting the building itself, speaking of experience organization during the Cold War Hong Kong. Finally, by analyzing Cici's transmedia technique employed in this novella, this paper demonstrates how Cici's editorial work as a column writer of the global film industry influenced her writing career as a novelist. First of all, let us start from the modernist experiment that Cici conducted in The Beautiful Building. The novel is divided into 10 chapters without any concrete plots. The novel describes the living experience of residents living in the Murray Building, 美丽大厦. Beginning with the narrator I, the first-person narrator who lives here with the neighbors, the novel has only one major event, namely the malfunction of the elevators in this building. By employing an alienated tone, the narrator describes the experience of modernization, which brought alienation among city's residents. In the later chapter of the novel, there is a second-person narrator you, to whom the author attempts to communicate, thus creating a space of dialogue, emphasizing the communal construction of the space among pages. Though lacking any concrete plots, the novel mentions reference of modernist artists such as Hemingway and John Dos Passos, whose style is similar to Cici's, as all of them confronted with the rapid speed of modernization and increasing degree of alienation between human beings. Secondly, instead of writing the experience of the co-modernization from the perspective of human beings, the novel describes Hong Kong's modernization progress by the personification of the building itself, through which the infrastructure of the city and the architecture of the novel intertwined and create a sense of community. In the novel, the elevator and the stairs are a group of counterpart. While climbing stairs is like being at home and getting rooted in everyday routines, using elevators, a subject that signifies modernization and technological innovation, is compared to traveling over the sea, thus creating a sense of diaspora. The sense of diaspora and nostalgia is conveyed in the novel by a closed-up description of climbing the stairs. In the passage personified the building, it says. So here is the passage. This is the first time you enter the heart of the for you, blah blah blah. You are inside the heart, like a volunteer scientist in much injected by blood vessels and the body. You look around the atrium, the ventricle and the muscle field in the nearby are rather an illusion. So at the end of the story, the first-person narrator becomes the building itself as it describes its experience of modernization in the city, with sense of alienation and differentiation became saturated within the city's everyday routine. Using an object instead of a human being to narrate the progress of Hong Kong's modernization, Cici demonstrates the newly created identity of Hong Kong has been deeply intertwined with the city's construction of the public space, the infrastructure, and the communal negotiation. As my previous section demonstrated, Cici's editorial work is crucial to understand her modernist style. Indeed, throughout the 1960s to the 1980s, Cici wrote extensively on the global film industry. Her comments upon filming spanned diverse topics, including filmic technology, cinematic languages, and star formation. Throughout the 1970s, Cici operated a column called the Camera Eye, 开麦拉眼, in the Chinese Student Weekly. Originally proposed by Soviet director Dziaga Vektorov, Kino Eye, or the camera eye, was used to record the proletarian sensibilities that fuse the real-life scenes with formless experiments. During the 1960s, Vektorov's Kindle Eye theory was revived as American direct cinema and French film Verite participated in the cinematic movement of portraying the real to cultivate anti-bourgeoisie sensibilities. Similarly, in the 1960s, Hong Kong's film industry became popular on a global stage. It was during this time that Cici proposed in her editorial column, The Camera Eye, that filming should not only serve the eye's needs, but also engage with the minds and hearts of humans, through which an architecture of screen was constructed to create a documentary lens that captures the sense of real life with formalist experiments. Cici employs a transmedia technique to portray the communal life running in the Murray Building in the novel The Beautiful Building. This combination of the documentary lens and filmic technique is best captured at the end of the novel. So here's the passage from the end of the novel. As the building narrates itself in the middle of Hong Kong's modernization during the Cold War, adopting a camera eye and moving along with it. The final chapter of the beautiful building, retrieves a symphony taking place between the infrastructure, the film industry, and the people who reside in the city approached by the Cold War globalization. To summarize, this paper discusses Cici's creation of a localized and hybrid Hong Kong identity in the beautiful building through investigating her editorial work since the 1960s. This paper argues that only by reading her novels along with her publishing and editorial works could we comprehend the formless techniques she employs in the novel, including fragmentary narration, transmedia practice between literary arts and visual media, and the object-oriented description. As the novel's title, The Beautiful Building is a mistake of the Marie Building, as Li is translated not as financial benefits, but rather the beauty, the hybridity, and brokenness that this novel engages with creates a communal identity of Hong Kong composed by the voice of the human, the non-human, and the multimedia arts. Thank you very much.